IPL. And our shared mission is to work with our faith communities and community stakeholders to address the biggest crisis humans are facing today, and that is climate change. And before I get
Lyle's on this one.
all right, somehow my and I cannot get to this guarded thing to get the recording button done. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and start. I'm sorry for the interruption. But I would like to welcome you to our 42nd Climate Conversation program. Climate Conversation is funded by Energize Delaware, which is a statewide nonprofit created by State of Delaware, and which ensures that businesses, residences, are energy efficient and climate resilient. And we're very thankful for their generous funding to this program. Delaware Interfaith Power and Light, we have been around for close to a decade, working with our faith communities and addressing climate change and climate justice. And we are so thrilled today to work, to have this climate conversation with DNREC, because they just released the Delaware Climate Action Plan. And we have among us prominent interfaith leaders who will be sharing their perspective on climate change and how faith communities can play an important role in tackling climate crisis. And I just want to make sure that recording is on from my side.
Shweta, it says it's recording, so I think you're good.
All right. Okay. All right.
I'm recording it, don't worry.
Okay. And now I will, before we actually get started, I would like to, since, we are in the presence with so many faith leaders, I would like to invite Pastor Andy to start us with a prayer so I can, formally open this program. Pastor Andy.
Oh, thank you, Shweta. So good to be with you all. And I see so many faces and names with whom we've engaged this struggle. And so thank you also for the introduction. I'm going to text my mom right away and tell her I was called prominent. She's not going to believe it. So I also offer a visual. I've become enamored with backgrounds. And so I offer Mother Earth spreading over my shoulders. And may we remember this gift that we have received. It may be the only thing, earth, air, water, and sea, that we share. And so knowing that we share this beautiful gift, let us pause for a moment and remember from whom we come. And so it is, gracious God, that we gather on this night with hearts seeking and hearts yearning to take care of what you offered all of us. For we too are of your creation. And so bless our conversation, bless all that we would learn, and then fill us with energy and passion to pursue climate justice. And we ask and we pray this all in the name of all of the goodness that you created. Amen.
Amen.
It wasn't my hand for that.
Thank you, Pastor Andy. That was beautiful. And I will get back to my, and, just like Pastor Andy said, there is just a different perspective faith leaders and faith communities can really bring to the table when we are talking about tackling climate crisis. So now I would like to just go over what our program overview would be for our next 1.5 hours. We'll just have a highlight of the Delaware Climate Action Plan by Susan Love, who's among us. And then we'll have short time for question and answers. For a quick 10 minutes, we will take some questions from the audience. And then we'll get into a conversation with our interfaith leaders here to get their perspective on climate change and what faith communities can bring to the table. And then we will get into a breakout session, which will also last 10 to 15 minutes, where all of you can really participate and share your perspective, what your congregations are doing, and what would you like to do personally to, to tackle climate change, or if you've learned something new today. And then we'll all come together and, share some closing remarks and take it from there. So now, without any further ado, I would like to call Susan Love, who is an administrator at the Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy in the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Susan, take it away.
Good.
I will stop my sharing.
Good evening, everyone. Can you see Delaware's Climate Action Plan up on your screen? Yeah, was that a thumbs up, Shweta?
Yes.
Yep, great. Okay, wonderful. So technology is working. So Reverend Andy, your prayer was successful. We have been heard. So good evening, everybody. As Shweta said, my name is Susan Love, and I am the administrator of the Climate and Sustainability section in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you briefly about climate change and what the state is doing and what you can do. I hope to give you some useful information to tee up a really interesting and thoughtful discussion later. And because I like to go on quite a bit, I have a stopwatch timing me. So I am going to make sure I stay right on time tonight so that everybody can get on with their evening when we are finished. So I'm going to go ahead and get right down to it. Climate change is real. It is happening now, and it is caused by us. In Delaware, we are already experiencing climate change through sea level rise, increasing temperatures, particularly warmer winters, and more frequent intense storms, including heavy precipitation and flooding. These climate changes bring more flooding, hotter summers, warmer winters, more bugs, and damage to agriculture, infrastructure, and homes. Across the world, though, climate change is experienced differently in different parts of the globe. In some places, it will be wetter. In some places, droughts will impact populations. More coastal storms, wildfires, melting permafrost, changes to fish and wildlife migration patterns that indigenous peoples may rely on. So the changes are vast and diverse in different parts of the globe. And in addition, drought and other changing weather patterns have been pinpointed as the reason for mass migrations across the globe, including from Guatemala. So why are all these changes happening? Well, that's because human activities have increased what we call greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, water, methane, trap heat around the earth, making, and this heat trapping actually makes the earth a nice place to live. Mars doesn't have greenhouse gases, so we live on Earth. But burning oil, coal, and natural gas for fuel, as well as agriculture and industrial activities, release additional greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, increasing the concentration of these gases and giving the Earth an extra blanket of warmth that it really doesn't need. The Earth's temperature has increased by about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s, which, if you remember your history, is when the Industrial Revolution began. That increased heat drives all of those different climate changes that I just talked about. Here in Delaware, there are three primary contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and that is transportation, which is actually the largest source of planet warming emissions, both in our state and in the US, industrial pollution, and the generation of electricity. Those are our three big climate or greenhouse gas emission sources. Oh, so What do we do? And who does it? These are really good questions. There are two types of actions that we can take to plan for and respond to climate change. One is that we need to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. As we continue to emit greenhouse gases, our planet continues to warm, and those effects that I talk about worsen over time. Governor Carney established a statewide goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 26% by the year 2025, and that's from a 2005 baseline level. And the Biden administration just recently committed the United States to reducing emissions by at least 50% by 2030, also from 2005 baseline. And I'm going to talk for a minute about our plans to get there. The second thing that we need to do, in addition to reducing these emissions, is to prepare ourselves for the future that we know is going to be different than our current climate conditions. And even if we stopped releasing greenhouse gases today, we would still continue to see some changes in our climate. So we need to prepare ourselves for warmer temperatures, more flooding, increased storminess, et cetera. So increasing our resiliency to storms and flooding and adapting to these changing conditions is something we also need to do. So we need to both reduce our emissions and prepare for a different future. Well, who needs to do these things? Well, everyone everywhere has a role to play in helping to solve the climate change challenge. And this means every single one of you on this call, and your congregations and your families. Me, as a government employee and a leader of a government agency, I have an important role to play, right? As do all state agencies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about these roles. Churches, mosques, temples, businesses, and nonprofit entities, all of these organizations can also play a really important role. And you as an individual making your own choices in your own life have a really important role to play. So I'm going to dive into each one of those roles very quickly, and then we're going to talk maybe more about those later on. And then I'm going to talk more about the climate action plan. And I'm going to do so quickly because my stopwatch here is counting down. So I'm going to start with government action because I'm from the government tonight. So I'll start there. Government action is critically important for systemic changes, which then in turn allow businesses, churches, and individuals to take action to combat climate change. Federal government action on vehicle emission standards drove hybrid and electric vehicle deployment, and that has reduced emissions. Renewable energy goals set by state and local governments have been critical to increasing the amount of solar panels and windmills that we have in our states and on our grid. Government funding helps to stimulate innovative research, which then increases the pace of technology and brings consumer costs down. So you can see the role that government plays at all levels, federal, state, and local levels. And we also lead by example by putting into practice those things that I'm going to talk about more in a second. Building our buildings so they're not in floodplains, making sure that our staff are resilient, making sure that we're prepared for hot temperatures and outdoor workers, switching out our gasoline and diesel vehicles for electric vehicles that don't pollute. And then we help others do the same. Think about the US Postal Service switching out all of their very loud Postal Service Jeeps for electric vehicles. That is an incredibly large emission reduction potential, and that's just with one federal agency. Well, what about your church or temple or other institutions like businesses? You also have a very special role to play, whether we're talking about a religious organization or even a business. But as a religious organization, you can inspire action and you can educate. You can foster conversations about climate change like the one that we're having today. There is a famous climate scientist who says that the most important thing you can do about climate change is to talk about it. Her name is Catherine Hayhoe, and she's great. Go look her up on the Google. Talk to your friends, your family, and decision makers. This is a really important step that religious organizations can help facilitate. You too, like government entities, you can lead by example. Many of your congregations own buildings and maintain grounds. And you buy things, you buy paper, you buy pens. You can buy sustainable products. You can investigate renewable energy and install an EV charging station for your members. You can build pollinator gardens. And I know that Shweta is very interested in helping you do all of those things. So make sure you talk to Shweta when we're done. You can also, as a religious institution or nonprofit or business, provide care and support for victims of climate change, natural disasters, and other public health emergencies. And I know many of you already do this. You can also prepare your own facilities better for those emergencies as well by making sure your building is resilient. In your own life, you can do many of those same things. You can lead by example and you can inspire. Please don't expire, inspire. You can talk about it and you can educate your friends and your family. You can talk to decision makers in your life, whether it's your boss or your local council person, about how important climate change is to you and how it affects your life and your livelihood. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. That's like a bumper sticker somewhere that I've seen, right? You can take steps that are meaningful and achievable for you and take pride in those steps. Not everyone can ride a bike 30 miles to work. Not everybody has the ability to put solar panels on their homes, but everybody can upgrade a light bulb and chase their husband around the house, making sure that he turns off the lights. True story. You can have energy assessments in your home. You can weatherize your own home. You can use less energy and you can save money by doing that. We also have programs for that. You can also prepare yourself and your family for emergencies so that you can be more resilient yourself to the changes that climate change is going to bring. Make sure your home has flood insurance if you are in or near a floodplain. Have a hazard kit and a go bag. Check in on your neighbors during storms. So I'm going to give you a website later on that will point you to a lot of the DNREC programs that we have available and our partner programs that can help you. All right, so now I've talked for almost all of my time, but now I'm going to talk to you about what I came here to talk to you about, which is the Climate Action Plan. The Delaware's Climate Action Plan was just released this November. This plan builds upon 2 decades of work on climate change here in Delaware, and it does 3 primary things. It outlines strategies that will help Delaware meet its short-term emission reduction goal, which is reducing our emissions by at least 26% by 2025. For the first time, it integrates emission reduction strategies with resiliency actions, those 2 things that I talked about earlier. And it sets the course for emission reductions and resiliency actions beyond 2025, because action doesn't stop in 2025. Our Climate Action Plan is a living document meant to provide guidance to programs and policies moving forward. The strategies are meant to be implemented over time. We can't do everything at once. This is a long, multi-year plan. And as our understanding of climate change in Delaware grows, and as technologies change, the strategies may also need to evolve and change. I want to make clear that our plan that we published is a GPS showing us the path forward. The plan itself does not change any existing laws, policies, regulations, or funding levels. That comes during implementation for certain strategies. It's also very important to recognize that how we accomplish each of the actions in the plan, which I'm going to talk about in 1 second, how these actions are accomplished, is just as critical as what we do. We have 3 guiding principles for implementing the plan. 1 is that we want to ensure that actions are ambitious, but they can accommodate changes in climate and economic conditions over time. We also want to ensure that the full costs and benefits of taking action are accounted for in considering how much it costs to do a certain thing. For example, climate-related emergence, the the cost of climate-related damaged infrastructure is quite high. And so it might make sense to spend more money early to make that infrastructure resilient. So we want to take into account all of that. Another thing that we really want to make sure we think about is that energy efficiency and renewable energy can save money over time, even though the upfront cost of doing that may be higher than doing the normal thing. And then 3, we want to engage early and often with stakeholders and community members, and to avoid inequities in the design and implementation of our actions. The plan has 2 major sections. One is strategies for maximizing our resilience. And the plan is available online, and you can go look at all the details. I'm just going to give you a very quick highlight right here. The plan sets out examples of what the state can do, and state agencies in particular, what we can do to become more resilient to the effects of climate change. The strategies and the specific actions in the plan outline example ways that we can plan for future conditions as the state sets rules and regulations, as we build infrastructure or pay for infrastructure, and as we build and rehabilitate buildings. It outlines specific ways that we can train people about climate change and train them how to prepare for climate change. And it also has a particular focus on ways that we can help local governments, or your cities and your counties, which is really a very important intersection between many of you and your government entities. It also highlights ways that we can better research and monitor these changes through time so that we can adapt and change our plans based on this. The plan also outlines ways that we can meet our 2025 emission reduction goal, which is 26% by 2025, and then achieve emission reductions beyond that. And it really focuses on clean and renewable energy, energy efficiency, and switching to electric vehicles, among many other strategies. It also highlights ways that we can use our natural and agricultural lands to trap and store carbon, and to reduce industrial pollutants, which have a specifically high potential for global warming. The actions outlined in this plan reduce greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which help solve a global issue. But all of these actions also have local, what policy wonks call co-benefits, or local benefits right here at home. Converting to electric vehicles, and especially converting heavy-duty vehicles to electric, reduces tailpipe pollutions in our neighborhoods. These tailpipe pollution includes ozone, creates ground-level ozone, has carbon monoxide and particulate matter. So cleaning that up has significant health benefits, especially for people who may suffer from asthma, right? So you can see that responding to this global problem also has local benefits, and vice versa. In addition, just to throw out another example, using less energy, so installing energy efficiency in your home or church or business, means saving money and being more comfortable in your space. Renewable energy also saves money over the long time, and electric vehicles, renewable energy, energy efficiency, resiliency measures, these all create job opportunities, and many of them create really well-paying blue-collar jobs. So that was the 85-page plan in a nutshell, and I encourage you all to go to de.gov/climate plan to read the plan yourself. And I want to leave you with a couple things to think about, and like 1 minute over time, but I'm going to keep moving quickly. So just something to think about is, like, I often get asked, but Susan, Delaware is so small. What difference can we make here in the state by taking action? And I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of food for thought on that question, because I do get that question so much more. So when you look at greenhouse gas emissions from around the globe, remember, this is a global issue. We all have greenhouse gas emissions. The US, China, and India are among the largest emitters of greenhouse gases in the world, like on a country basis. And this graphic shows you the emissions in each country from fuel combustion. And there's lots of other emissions, but we're going to focus on fuel combustion here. you can see that China's emissions are twice that of the United States, and 4 times that of India. And China's emissions are often cited as a reason for the US to not take strong climate action. Well, they're not doing it, why should we? When you look differently at that, China's per person emissions are half of that of the emissions in the United States. And United States per person emissions are 8 times higher than people in India, right? So when you look at what I emit versus what somebody in India is emitting, I'm emitting 8 times that. And I raised this point to highlight how important the actions that we take here in the US is, because we have such a large per person emissions, but also because many of the countries in the world that have caused the least amount of pollution are also likely to suffer the worst consequences of climate change. Places like the Philippines, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and India are ranked as the most vulnerable to climate change, heat, drought, and flooding. And they have the least resources to adapt to these changes that are caused by climate change. And so I just want to leave you with that tonight before I give you all the websites, because I think that will help set some of the context for some of the conversations that will happen moving forward. So before we jump into those conversations, I just want to let you know that you can access all kinds of great information on our website, de.gov/climate plan. That is de.gov/climate plan. And you can also find all kinds of programs that can help you in your own home and you and your congregation save money and be more resilient to climate change. So I'm going to stop. I apologize. I went over a couple minutes, and Shweta can decide if we have time for questions or not.
Yes, maybe a couple questions. And I know that there are some questions here in the chat room, chat box. Or maybe if somebody wants to just unmute themselves, we can take 2 questions and then move on to our conversation. I know some of them are comments.
What about Energize Delaware?
Energize Delaware is also a great resource. They are not a government agency. They are a partner agency that also has lots of resources. And I'm sure that Shweta or the real Michael can drop their website into the chat so that everybody can go there. I myself am going to do a home energy audit, which is it should be called a home energy assessment, so that I can make my home more weather tight and save energy. And they have money for that.
Yeah, so Susan, I see one question right here. How does the recent revision to the Coastal Zone Act that permit new industrial pollution in the coastal zone play into the new climate action plan? If you can see Amy Rose's questions, the latest one.
That's an interesting question. And there are sections in the climate action plan that address industrial pollutants. So, and the recent revisions to the Coastal Zone Act provide a template or provides a way to have new industrial development in the coastal zone and sets up a practice for that. So that new development actually is required to be more resilient to coastal storms. So that is sort of a direct link. The emissions from that would come into play with strategies that reduce emissions in the industrial sector.
Okay, maybe one more question. Susan, can you look at the chat, see?
So I want to speak to the 26% goal that the state has set for 2025. I saw, I think, a couple questions about that. And the answer is that in 2015, President Obama pledged that the country would reduce our emissions by 26% or more by 2025. And at that, a few years later, multiple states got together to uphold that pledge, and Delaware was among those states. So at that time, Delaware pledged to meet or exceed the federal goal, which at that time was 26% reduction by 2025. The Biden administration very recently announced that the new US pledge to the world would be 50% by 2030. So the Climate Action Plan, released in November, provides some data and information that can be used should the state wish to pursue updating that goal to 2030. So you can check that out.
Thank you, Susan. Personally, and on behalf of DIPL, I would like to say that we are definitely not satisfied with that goal ourselves, and then that's what people power can do, is that we communicate what looks right to us, and if it does not look aggressive, then we let our elected officials know that that our state can do more, and we are not satisfied with that. But now I would like to invite our faith leaders for a conversation. I'm trying to put a spotlight to all our faith leaders here. And Michael, if you can help me find Irfan. Irfan, I found Irfan. Add a spotlight, and I'm just now looking for one more. Pastor Andy. All right, Pastor Andy. And here you are. Yeah, and I can't, and maybe I can remove spotlight here. And Pastor Andy. There we go. I think I have everyone. So thank you, Susan. That was really great. I think I've put a link in the chat, and I will be following up with all of you attendees, and we'll share a link. Please go and check the detailed plan, and let's stay connected, and let's keep ourselves updated on what's going on at the state level and how we can get involved. If we are not happy with the goal the Delaware Climate Action Plan has set for us, then let's reach out to the elected officials and let them know. But I welcome our faith leaders here today to discuss what faith communities can really, what are the perspectives on climate change? What do our faith leaders think about climate change? And I would like to now, first of all, just go around and have you introduce yourselves, and then just share a little bit, what's your perspective on climate change, and specifically related to your particular faith. We can get started with Rabbi Yair Robinson from Congregation Beth Emet.
You did the heavy lifting for me. I'm Rabbi Yair Robinson from Congregation Beth Emet. It's a joy to be able to be here with so many of my interfaith friends, and just looking around the Zoom to so many people who have done so much work in this community on environmental justice and beyond. I think there's agreement. I'm assuming, maybe this is not a good thing for me to do, that there's agreement in the room on the need for climate action, the imperative for climate action. And from a Jewish perspective, that need is baked right into our tradition. One of my favorite midrashim, that is a rabbinic interpretation on scripture that was created 2,000 years ago, is a response to the book of Ecclesiastes. comes from a book called Ecclesiastes Rabbah, and it talks about God speaking to the first humans in the garden and saying, take care to not spoil or destroy my world. And there is so much power in all of those words. First of all, the emphasis on whose world it is, not ours, God's. It's not ours. We don't get to do what we want with it as if it were our possession. And the warning, take care to not spoil or destroy it. Easy to do all of those things. And now the question becomes, having done so, how do we repair it? How do we mend what we have damaged? So a little taste before we get into our conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi. And now I'll ask, and we can maybe move clockwise from my screen. Reverend Archie, would you want to go next?
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. And I'm thankful for an opportunity to be here and for members of the faith communities and nonprofits and government sectors who care for creation. I am Joe Archie. I am the district superintendent for the United Methodist Churches in the state of Delaware. And so I represent about 140 churches in all 3 counties in Delaware. And if I could just share one thing that comes to mind for me, I think about it in terms of love. If we are to follow Jesus's commandments for Christians, Jesus is our leader. I look at the Gospel of Mark, which tells us that, as Jesus is quoting the Torah, he says, the greatest of the commandments is that we should love the Lord our God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And he said the second is like it, love our neighbors as self. And so we look at all those folks who are a part of creation, who live and share this planet together. If we love each person that God has created and all of the creatures that God has created, then we will do our very best to care for them. And of course, we do know the effects that we have on the climate and how if we make some changes, we can create a better world for all of us. That's what love means. It means making changes so that others can live better, including ourselves.
Thank you, Reverend Archie. And now I will invite Irfan Patel from Islamic Society of Delaware.
Thank you, Shweta. Good evening, everyone. Salam, shalom. My name is Irfan Patel. I'm one of the board of directors for the Islamic Society of Delaware. I'm also the chair of the Interfaith Committee at ISD. And I'm also on the board of Delaware Interfaith Power and Light, which is one of the co-sponsors of the event today. I'm really glad to be here, very humbled to be here to share the Islamic perspective on climate action. As Muslims, we need to look no further than the Quran for guidance, where there are about close to 200 verses concerning the environment. Muslims are taught that the greater indeed than the creation of man is the creation of heavens and earth. And the reality is that nothing could be more Islamic than protecting God's most precious creation, the earth. Islam also teaches its followers to take care of the earth. Right? Muslims believe that humans should act as guardians of the planet, and that they will be held accountable by God for their actions. This concept of stewardship is very powerful one, and this was exactly used in this is what was exactly used in the Islamic Declaration on climate change to propel change in environmental policies in Muslim countries. So back in 2015, there was a Islamic Declaration on global climate change that took place in the Islamic Climate Change Symposium in Istanbul in 2015. This was post-Paris Climate Summit of 2015. It was jointly hosted by the OIC and GCC, and also supported by the Climate Action Network. So the message of the declaration was based on the environmental framework presented within the principles of Islam, and is part of faith-based activism. So hopefully we should use this proven framework as the principles of Islam to encourage conservation in the Muslim community and beyond.
Sorry, I keep muting myself. Thanks, Irfan. And last but not least, Reverend Andy Jacob. And I think you are muted.
There we go. I'm going on again, off again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. My name is Michael. No, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Andy Jacob. I serve Hanover Presbyterian Church in Wilmington, and I'm always mindful that if you didn't know this, presbyopia is a condition of the eye where you have difficulty seeing things close up. And so basically that means, I guess, we're supposed to take the long range view and perhaps we'll see it better. So I turn, when I think about this, to the very beginning, the beginning of the Bible, and to the creation story. And for me, there has always been this juxtaposition of two words that have become crucial in my personal theology of creation care, because God commands the people, and most of the translations I've read agree, that we should have dominion, right? And so let me take a moment. Dominion is the positional authority of stewardship. It means to rule, to teach, to cultivate. It means to govern, in the sense that dominion establishes boundaries and directional intent. When humans operate with dominion, there is form and infrastructure. And for me, I hear that a deep and profound call for what our relationship should be with creation, and contrast that to domination, which is supremacy or preeminence over another, exercise of mastery or ruling power, exercise of preponderant governing or controlling influence. And so I think for people of faith, and I know for me in my walk, constantly reminding myself of that distinction, and even asking myself at moments, am I right now practicing dominion or am I practicing domination? And so we have a sacred gift, and we've been asked to be stewards of that sacred gift. And forgive me, perhaps an overly simplistic analogy, but imagine somebody who loves you unconditionally and without question, and that person created something and gave it to you and said, take good care of this. And maybe if we thought about the earth as the gift from God that God made and gave to us and asked us to take care of it, I think we would all, and again, I keep including myself in this, I've got a long way to go, but I'm working. So that's a theological perspective, not necessarily Presbyterian.
Thank you, Reverend. And you know, I definitely believe, I think that's the core value of all our faith traditions, and all. You know, I'm from Hindu faith, and you know, our thousands of year old text Vedas, they talk about the same thing. Right. So I think that's a common thread that can bring all different faith groups together to work on stewardship, and which is the beauty of our work. I will move on to the next question that I will pose to Rabbi. You know, we know that scientists have been telling us about facts all the time, right? And that's not really move people, and you know, all the facts are so scary, and it has not really helped us move to action. And we truly now believe that love, not fear, will help us move to act on climate. How can spiritual leaders talk about acting on climate as a way to love our neighbors?
I think one of the things I take from my tradition speaks of mitzvot. You often hear the word mitzvah, and it gets used often to mean a good deed, right? Or doing somebody a solid, right? Doing somebody a favor. But it actually has a deeper meaning, which is a sacred obligation. The idea that we have an obligation beyond ourselves, beyond our family and friends and inner circle. We have an obligation to our community. We have an obligation to God, to this world. We have an obligation to anyone created in God's image, which extends far beyond the room I'm sitting in right now to envelop the entire world. So I think the more we can talk about the idea of obligation as an act of love, as an act of awe. Awe sometimes is understood, AWE, awe, sometimes gets understood as fear to a certain degree. But there is a sense when we look up at the heavens, when we look at God's creation, when we look at the damage we have done, how can we not look with awe? How can we not, just lost an iceberg with one of the largest icebergs ever in the last couple of weeks, just melted to nothingness into the ocean. How can we not look at that with awe and with trembling and understand that we have an obligation as a result to the people around us? I'll share another midrash, if I may. There's a wonderful story of, it's a parable that the rabbis tell, of a person walking by and they see this enormous building, an apartment building on fire. And this person says, this building is on fire. Where is the person managing the building to put the fire out? What's going on? And somebody pokes their head out and says, I'm the building manager. And they're trapped in the fire themselves. And the story is actually likened to how Abraham first encounters God. The patriarch Abraham first encounters God, who says, this world is on fire. Where is the one who created it? And God shows up and says, I'm here. And the implication is clear, but I need help. God needs our help. So the more we can talk about that sense of, we're not just bystanders on the street watching the world be on fire. We have to take action ourselves as a sense of obligation to the people, all of us trapped in these flames. The more we can talk about that, the better.
Thank you, Rabbi. Irfan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, thanks, Rabbi. I mean, I think he's a tough act to follow, right? So, but anyway, just some additional comments. So I think even in the Islamic tradition, right? If you look at the tradition of the Prophet, there are a couple of things. I must have shared this in previous interfaith gatherings as well. So there is saying that treat others the way you want to be treated, right? And then there is another prophetic tradition that focuses on the fact that if you go to bed knowing that if you go to bed with a full stomach, right, and if you're knowing that your neighbor went to bed hungry, then your deeds are not counted in the eyes of God, right? So there is so much emphasis on taking care of others, right? Just like all other faiths. So I connect that to the fact that if we want to take care of one another, right? If we want to leave this earth a better place than we found, right, to the next generation, I think that's where the climate action comes into play.
Thank you, Irfan. Very well put. I will move to the next topic that I feel is a really important part of the IPL's work too. When we talk about climate change, we also want to talk about climate justice. And Susan touched on a really good point of emissions created by United States, somebody living in states versus somebody living, say, in India. And it's 8 times more. Like if everybody spend the resources like Americans, we will need five Earths, to have enough for everyone. So there's definitely a justice piece to it. Historically, marginalized communities are disproportionately bearing the brunt of climate impacts. So I would like, I would like to invite you, Reverend Archie, to to share some perspective on this justice piece when we talk about climate change.
Yes, thank you, Shweta. You've touched on something very important. Some of the persons on our planet who live on this planet who are the least responsible for adding to the pollution or the adding of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, some of the persons who are least responsible for them are the ones who in many cases are suffering the most. I have to think about Jesus telling us in Matthew chapter 25 in the New Testament. He says, what we have done unto the least of these, we have done unto him also. What we have not done to the least of these, we have not done to him. And so judgment was based on whether you were treating well the poor, the downtrodden, the dispossessed, the marginalized. And many of the developing nations are the ones that are going to be suffering the most in many cases, versus the developed nations who are more responsible. And in many cases, you brought up China, you brought up the United States, you brought up some of these highly industrialized countries, these countries that make decisions that disproportionately affect what, again, Jesus would call the least of these. So that's a justice issue. We always have to frame how good we are at living into faith, and every one of our faiths talk about how we treat those who are the least of these. And so if we continue to consume at an unsustainable level, then we not only contribute to the continued poverty, war, fighting over resources, limited resources in certain areas, and then also we continue to the oppression of others. So I think we have to frame it in that respect. Our faith leaders have to use our social capital as leaders. People expect, and there's still a lot of respect for faith leaders, lay and clerics. We have to use our social capital to teach. In our tradition, we call it disciple, or help people to grow into their faith and realize that this is not some add-on to what we believe as people of faith, but this is integral to what we do. Mm-hmm. Being a person who is responsible for letting justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream is something that all of us should embrace. And if they hear it repeatedly from their faith leaders who use their social capital to teach that this is just as important as prayer, as reading our sacred texts, as doing good deeds for one another, this is just as important in building us as whole people, then I think we would be in a much better place. We have to use that. Thank you,
Reverend Archie. I would like to ask you, Reverend Andy, I know you were there on that, present on that town hall that was held by Delaware Poor People Campaign a couple weeks back, talking about some of the Hurricane Ida victims who saw how bad it was to have to deal with the Hurricane Ida flooding event. I think it was in September of last year. They're still dealing with those consequences. And we know that's going to even get worse every time, right? And we know those are one of the more poorest people who have to deal with the consequences of climate change. And when it comes to resources, they still don't have roof over their head. So do you want to comment on that?
Surely, yes, I was present, and I would suggest that there were two hurricanes. The first one had water and lasted overnight, and the other one is still happening. And so there's roughly 30 families that the storm was on September 2nd. And there are roughly 30 families that are still homeless. And the purpose of the forum was very simply from the Poor People Campaign perspective to give voice to the victims in the company of those who have control of resources. And I'm sad but happy to report that there has been significant movement on behalf of those families. And it was, from my estimation, very simply that a light was shined into the darkness, and people realized, and people became aware, and people responded. And that gives me hope that sometimes people aren't aware, or at the very least, when they're held accountable, they will respond. I was also quickly going to just share, several years ago, the term food insecurity became more popular than hunger or people who are hungry. And I found it really worked for me because it has several implications. So food insecurity is about food, but it's also emotional, right? I think we've probably all had a moment when we felt insecure, and it can be a devastating feeling. And so think about if you were to experience medical insecurity, employment insecurity, housing insecurity, and then add environmental insecurity, and I think we can at least begin to imagine what it feels like for communities that are disproportionately affected. This is COVID, but it's a perfect illustration. 34% of the people who died from COVID were African American, who are 12% of the general population. And then finally, I turned into a kind of a geek tonight, I apologize for that, but I found a fascinating EPA study that was just released in September. And Susan, don't feel bad. You thought your report was long. Woof. Anyway, African Americans are 34% more likely to live in areas with the highest projected increases in childhood asthma diagnoses. They're 40% more likely to live in areas with the highest projected increases in extreme temperature-related deaths. Hispanic and Latino individuals are 43% more likely to live in areas with the highest projected reductions in labor hours due to extreme temperatures, and are 50% more likely to live in areas with the highest estimated increases in traffic delays due to increases in coastal flooding. I think it's something we all know at some ethereal level, but I think that sometimes hearing the numbers and seeing and hearing faces, which is what happened at Forum, and hearing the stories of what it's like to experience this is what can move us. So amen, Reverend Archie, let's use our social capital, but let's also use it to give voice to those who can really make a difference, those for whom this is a direct experience.
Right. Thank you so much. Yes, those numbers, you know, a very integral part of DIPL's work is also addressing climate justice so we can really build a more equitable world together. And, you know, we believe faith leaders and faith communities can really play a very integral role in building that vision together. Now I want to, I know we're right close to ending our conversation, but I definitely want to touch on the climate solutions part, which is, you know, which is equally important. Let's talk about what each of your congregations maybe have done that, you know, are getting started on some of the work that can inspire others. So maybe if each of you can just share an example of that work that is encouraging, that you think that is helping the community. If you can just share an example, and we go around and talk about what congregations can do or what you plan to do with your congregations. Any of you can start.
Well, I think energy audits are important. Many of our congregants worship in buildings that are energy inefficient. And so working with organizations like IPL and others, we can get the word out that there are people who will come and help you do energy audits and help you to get to a place where you can feel good about your energy usage. And then everything is interconnectional. So then we can talk to individuals about how they use energy in their homes, encourage them to tell others, neighbors, about how they can be more energy efficient, and in many cases, save money and become energy efficient at the same time. Everybody wants to save money. So that's not a hard sell, how saving money. So I think that's one thing that churches, mosques, synagogues, houses of worship are starting to move in that direction. We've seen a positive energy in that direction.
Thank you. That's definitely a low-hanging fruit, and that's definitely Delaware IPL can help you, help your congregation with. Anybody who's attending, whose congregation has not used that program, that's free of cost. We facilitate that through Energize Delaware.
Yeah.
Rabbi or Irfan, if anybody wants to jump in.
Yeah, sure. So like Reverend Archie said, right? So as you know, we, even ISD, right? In our facility, we did go through the energy audit and we installed the solar panels. And then we're also happy because we are also saving the environment. At the same time, we're saving money as well, right? As part of energy audit, we were able to get rid of 3 huge refrigerators, and we bought some energy efficient refrigerators. All small steps towards the big cause, right? And then the other thing we have done is we have really started in our Friday is our mass, right? Our service. So we started to talk about energy conservation and climate change as one of the topics once a quarter, right? A good beginning, once a quarter, and we know that these sermons have a very profound effect on the community. So basically, I was doing some research a couple of months ago, and in Indonesia in 2013, the most populous Muslim country, right? And they kind of issued a religious edict, right, saying that every Muslim should sign up for a climate action plan. And then, it kind of had a rewarding result, right? So, and then the last thing is, the other thing where we are encouraging people is for Friday prayers, we could easily have anywhere with 800,000 people show up in just the span of like 45-minute service. And basically, we're encouraging people to carpool, right? So we are encouraging that anyone who comes with a carpool, they get preference in the parking lot, right? So sort of giving an incentive. Very baby steps, but very meaningful steps.
Thank you. Those are really encouraging to hear. Rabbi, would you like to share something?
A couple of small things that God willing will make a difference in our world, and one big thing. As a community, we've started working with Interfaith Power and Light for their Sacred Grounds program, and started working on creating a community garden. We have a lot of land on our property, and a lot of our landscaping is grass. Grass, shrubbery, that sort of thing. What would it mean to create a community garden? What would it mean to engage in the rest of the neighborhood and that? What would it mean to do some of that work? And I'm grateful that many of our lay people who are involved in that project are on this call right now. So that's one medium-sized thing that we hope eventually also leads to doing more with creating local habitat land and our property and things like that. We do have EV charging stations at our synagogue. If you have an electric car and you need to charge it up, I know the Cantor is a fan of that. Be able to charge her car, you can do so. We have, I think, 2 ports on our charging station. So just something so people are able to charge their car in the city of Delaware. The biggest thing that I think anybody can do is advocacy. Learning, yes, somebody talked about learning before. And yes, right from Deuteronomy, Vishinantam Levanecha, you should teach your children. We should do that. We should teach, we should learn about the issue, and then we need to call our state legislators, county officials, or city officials, national legislators, and we need to be able to say, as a person of faith, as a Delawarean, as a person who is a citizen of this tiny blue sphere in the middle of infinite nothingness, in the palm of God's hand, as one person wrote. we are concerned, I am concerned, and I want to make sure you vote for or vote against. I was always taught, push for legislation that is already out there. And there's a lot of places where you can find legislation that's already out there. You're already a supporter, great, go be a co-sponsor. Talk to your colleagues, get it to happen. But there is also a value in talking to especially our state legislators. Hey, these states are doing this, why aren't we? I've seen a lot of comment about that in the chat. I do want to acknowledge the fact that Representative Paul Bombach is here. I think there might be other elected officials here. I apologize if I didn't see you. But we do have some elected officials who are here. Hey, you know, I noticed that this state is doing X, Y, and Z. What do we need to do that here? Could you do that here? Can you look at that legislation and start working on building coalitions and making that happen here? I think that kind of prophetic speech, right? The prophets went out and spoke about what needed to be done, and reminded people what needed to be done. And the more we can do that, the more of a difference we'll all be able to make. Because me doing one little thing or my house of worship doing one little thing, it's not that it doesn't make a difference, it does. But how much more powerful is it to be able to get our elected officials to move things forward? To use a football analogy with the Super Bowl coming up, I might be able to get some yardage, but pushing to the elected officials will be able to actually get first downs and make it into the end zone.
I love that analogy. And, you know, with IPL, how we try to accomplish our mission is also through our programs that help congregations reduce their carbon footprint. And then we promote climate education programs through, you know, through climate conversations like these, because educating people, you know, on climate issues and telling them about climate solutions is important. But last but not least, we want people to really engage and help create this political will, because, you know, like IPCC report that came out last year, it tells us we have give or take 10 years to reverse this thing, turn around, you know, this crisis that we are in. So we have a very short window of opportunity, and to really do something powerful, we really need our political leaders to really work with us. And to create the political will, we need to be engaged in our local policy. So very well said, Rabbi. We definitely need faith leaders and faith community to be more engaged, and IPL can certainly help. Pastor Andy, what would you want to share?
Sure, I'll be real quick. Yair, I was sure you were going for the red zone analogy, but I won't pick up with that. Really quickly, I would close, at least from my perspective, with a wish, a hope, and a prayer. I find deep hope in the Exodus story, right? People in crisis, people spend 40 years in the wilderness. The only way they get through it is to work together. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that happens on the way. They're convinced they're going to die, but in the end, they end up in the promised land. And so I got to believe that we can be like the folks from, like the Israelites who were escaping from Egypt, that we can make it through this wilderness and together arrive in the promised land.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I will like to quickly turn to see if we can still hold a small group discussion. We have 15 minutes left, so maybe we can put people into small groups and just do one simple question. I want to just see where Susan Love is and what she feels about this. Susan?
This is your show, Shweta. My opinion does not matter here. But I think we have enough time to do a very quick, maybe 10-minute, and because I'm really interested to hear from others about what you want to do in your lives or your congregations, and then maybe how we can help. So I think if we do 10 minutes and then come back real fast for 5, we can still get everybody out on time.
All right, sounds good. So I'm going to I'm going to send you all in a breakout session. If everybody can just look at my screen here, we can just do maybe the first question here, share your name and something new that you learned today. And then maybe talk about, based on our discussion, what do you think your congregation should focus on? Or maybe share something really great that your congregation is already doing. So maybe we can just have a quick conversation and see where everybody is with on those points. So I'll just send you all in a group in breakout sessions now. And we are 32, so. All right. Here we go.
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. I mean, thank you again for facilitating this event, right, as always. So I think my closing thought is, I think we all share the same thought process here, right? Every individual and household has a measurable carbon footprint. So unless we as individuals take actions to reduce our footprint, the harm caused to the environment will not reduce. It'll only get worse. So let's do our part, and everything will fall in place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Irfan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Reverend Archie, before you leave, if you want to share any closing thoughts with us.
Yes, I would just like to say thank you to all of you for your for our work together. We are in solidarity here. Do everything you can to educate and share with others. That's the only way to do it, by building a movement, and stay steadfast in pressuring our legislators to make real decisions, not decisions that just to say that we're doing something, but decisions that are going to make real impact in our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us. We are working with Reverend Archie closely, and hopefully we can make some ambitious climate goals for all the congregations that he's responsible for, and really, that is the collective way we can really make a dent on climate action. So really excited about our work with UMC. Thank you so much for joining us. Rabbi Ayer, would you like to share some closing thoughts with us?
That sounds so daunting. Just glad that we're able to be part of this conversation, and I agree with what John just said. The more we can share and learn our differences, not just our similarities, the more we can do the good work that needs to be done, and step up to the challenge, no matter how daunting it might be.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Reverend Andy, would you like to share some closing thoughts?
Yeah, let's turn the world upside down. Let's be advocates. I mean, we've heard we all have the potential to be prophets, advocates, disciples, and so let's just go speak the truth to power, because the truth, if nothing is done, is not pretty.
No, it isn't.
Amen, Global Reverend.
Thank you. And that is so true. We all can be agents of change, and but we all can do more when we come together collectively. We all have to definitely do our bit as individuals, but we are at a moment, at a time where we really need some bold actions on climate, and I hope, and Delaware IPL strives to bring Interfaith community together, always, because we are stronger together, and together we can heal our planet. So I would really like to thank you all for joining us. this evening. And Susan, thank you, special thank you to you for your time this evening, and any closing thoughts that you want to share.
Oh, I was not prepared. My closing thought is that climate change can only be solved with all of us working together at every level, from the individual to the federal and world governments. And I appreciate that all of you are here today, taking time out of your busy lives to commit to that action. And I look forward to working with all of you in the future to make Delaware a more livable place for future generations.
You're here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And with that, I think it's 7:08. We just, we are very thankful for all of you for joining us, and
Grateful to you, Shweta.
really appreciate. And I hope you all can stay engaged. Please follow us on Facebook and sign up for our newsletter. But I would like to thank you for joining us tonight, and let's keep up the good work. Our Mother Earth needs that.
Thank you kindly, Shweta.
Thank you. Thank you so much.